Welcome to Module 23 on parallel and perpendicular lines. Make sure you have your notebook out to take notes so that you can use this on your quizzes and on your final exam. Turn to a new page in your notebook and write Module 23, Parallel and Perpendicular Lines. So this is going to combine some things that we've been learning up to this point about slopes and about writing and graphing equations. Let's talk about a quick introduction to parallel lines. So write your new topic there, Introduction to Parallel Lines. Parallel lines have the same slopes. You're going to want to write that down. So for example, y equals 2x minus 3 and y equals 2x plus 6 would be parallel lines. They would look something like this when you graph them because they have the same slope, but they go through different y-intercepts. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So let's make sure we know what opposite reciprocal is. Let's write this down first. If I give you a fraction, 1/2 and -2/1 are opposite reciprocals. We flip and change the signs. 2/3 and -3/2 are opposite reciprocal slopes. 4, remember 4 is the same thing as 4/1, and -1/4 are opposite reciprocal slopes. -1/5 and +5, because 5 is the same thing as 5/1, are opposite reciprocal slopes. So if I have an equation like y equals 1/2 x plus 3 equals -2x plus 7, those are perpendicular. They might look something like this. Perpendicular lines don't just cross. They cross at a 90-degree angle. So for example, these are not perpendicular lines. They cross together, but they don't cross at a right angle like these two do. Make sure you have the definition of parallel and perpendicular lines written down before we move on. New topic, find the slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. You should write the equation down. A says, what is the slope of a line parallel to this line? Well, remember, parallel lines have the same slope. The slope of the equation that they gave is -3/2, and so I would leave that the same for a line parallel to that. I don't care about the 2/3 because that's the y-intercept, and that doesn't have anything to do with parallel and perpendicular. Then it says, what is the slope of a line perpendicular to this line? Well, if the slope is -3/2, to find the slope that's perpendicular, which we can show with m and this little upside down t that looks like a perpendicular sign, we flip it and change the sign. So the slope would be +2/3. You pause the video and try this one on your own. So you should have known that the slope of this line is 4/3. The slope of a line perpendicular to that, so m perpendicular sign, we flip it and we change the sign. The slope of a line that's parallel would just be the same, so we would use 4/3 for that one. Now, we're still finding the slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. The directions haven't changed, but I want you to notice that this equation is in standard form, not in slope-intercept form. I can't look at this equation and figure out what the slope is. I have some work to do before I'm ready for A or B. I need to first isolate y so that I can figure out what the slope is. I'm going to start by adding 3x to each side. So now I'm left with -4y equals 3x minus 2. I'm going to divide everything by -4. The -4's cancel out. This becomes 3 over -4x, and then -2 over -4 reduces to +1/2. So the slope of this equation is 3 over -4. So for A, it says, what is the slope of a line perpendicular to this line? So we want the perpendicular slope, so we flip it and change the sign. For B, what is the slope of a line parallel to this line? Well, we just keep the slope the same, so it's 3 over -4. And don't forget, it doesn't matter where you put your negative as long as you have 1 on there. This would be the exact same thing as this, or would be the exact same thing as that. You pause the video now, try to isolate y, and then answer questions A and B. You should have first tried to isolate y, so you should have subtracted 7x from each side. So we have -8y equals -7x minus 4. We're going to divide both sides by -8, so the -8's cancel. -7 divided by -8 is +7/8, Negative 4 divided by negative 8 is positive 1/2. So the slope of this line is 7/8. So for A, it says, what is the slope of a line perpendicular? So that's the opposite reciprocal. I flip it and change the sign. Probably should have written that as M perpendicular there. The slope of a line parallel, we just keep the line the same, so it should be 7/8. All right, identifying parallel and perpendicular lines. So new topic, identifying parallel and perpendicular lines. So if this were really on Alex, they would give you the pairs like line 1 and line 2, line 1 and line 3, but I'll do this for you this time. So for line 1, this is not in slope-intercept form, so we have some work to do. We're going to divide both sides by 3, so y equals negative 5/3 x plus 4/3. And if I'm worried about parallel, perpendicular, or neither, I need the slope. I don't care about the y-intercept. So the slope of line 1 is negative 5/3. So line 2, 6x plus 10y equals negative 2. I'm going to subtract 6x from each side to isolate y. I get 10y equals negative 6x minus 2. I'm going to divide both sides by 10. Everything gets divided by 10. Negative 6 over 10 reduces to negative 3/5. 10 reduces to negative 1/5. So the slope of this line is negative 3/5. For this one, let's see, line 3, y e3 x plus 7. That's already in slope-intercept form, so the slope is just negative 5/3. So you tell me, line 1 and 2, are those parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Line 1 and 3, are those parallel, perpendicular, or neither? And line 2 and 3, are those parallel, perpendicular, or neither? And that should be all the pairs. Go ahead and pause the video and try that now. So for line 1 and line 2, you should have said neither. They are reciprocals, but they are not opposites. Both are negative. If they were perpendicular, one of these would have to be positive, and they are not. For line 1 and 3, you should have said parallel because they are exactly the same. And for line 2 and 3, you should have said neither. Again, they are reciprocals, but they are not opposite signs. All right, I want you just to start on this one by putting line 1, line 2, and line 3 in slope-intercept form. Hint, hint, line 3 is already done for you. Go ahead and do that now, and we'll do line 1 and 2 together. So for this one, you should have divided everything by negative 2. This becomes y equals negative 5/2 x. Remember, it doesn't matter where you put the negative. And then 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. So the slope of this one is negative 5/2. For this one, we subtract 10x from each side. So we get negative 4y equals negative 10x minus 6. We're going to divide everything by negative 4. The negative 4's cancel out. 10 over 4 reduces to 5/2. A negative divided by a negative becomes a positive. Negative 6 divided by negative 4 becomes a positive, and that reduces to 3/2. And then for this one, by the way, the slope on this one is 5/2, and the slope on this one is negative 2/5. All right, so we have all those in slope-intercept form. You pause the video. You tell me whether line 1 and 2 are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Line 1 and 3, parallel, perpendicular, or either. And line 2 and 3, parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Go ahead and try that now. Line 1 and 2, you should have said neither. They are opposite signs, but not reciprocals. Line 1 and 3, you should have said neither. They are reciprocals, but not opposite signs. And line 2 and 3, you should have said perpendicular because they are reciprocals and also opposite signs. All right, new topic, writing equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. So consider the line y equals negative 8x plus 4. The slope of that line is negative 8. When I see the word parallel, I know I want to use the same slope. So I know that m equals negative 8, and it goes through this point. You already know how to do this. We learned this on one of the previous lessons. This is point slope form. I have a point and I have a slope, so I'm going to substitute into point slope form. You might want to write this down in your notes if you don't have it handy. It's probably in a previous. So this becomes y minus -3 equals -8 times x minus -2. Keep, change, so this becomes y plus 3. Keep, change, and distribute, so that becomes -8x minus 16. We're going to subtract y equals -8x minus 3. So what we've done is we've taken slope from that line. Notice I didn't do anything with the y-intercept. I want a line that's parallel to this line, but goes through a different point. So I had the point and the slope, so I needed to use point slope form. Now for perpendicular, I need to switch up the slope. The perpendicular slope would be positive 1/8, and I have the same point. So it's going through the same point, but this time it has a different slope. So it's y minus -3 equals 1/8 times x minus -2. Keep, change, keep, change. Y plus 3, I'm going to distribute. 1/8 times x is 1/8 x. You can do this in your calculator. 1/8 times 2 if you're struggling. If you want to do it off to the side, you can. That's 2/8, which reduces to 1/4. Now we're going to subtract 3 from each side, so we get 1/8 x. Again, you can do this in your calculator by using your fraction button, or you can find a common denominator, which is 4. Multiply 3 times 4 to balance this out. 1 minus 12 is -11. So that should be -11/4. So again, I have written an equation. Because I had a point and I had a perpendicular slope, I used point slope form to write that equation. You pause the video and try this one on your own. Notice that the slope of this is -5. You have a point and you have a slope. Go ahead and try this one on your own. So you should have used point slope form. So you should have used y minus 5. For this one, it's perpendicular, so the perpendicular slope would be positive 1/5. So that's 1/5 times x minus -8. That stays the same. This could go keep, change, and then distribute. So this is 1/5 x plus 8/5. We're going to add 5 to each side. So we get y equals 1/5 x. Use your calculator if you want to with your fraction button, or you can add this the long way. Common denominator is 5. So that becomes 25/5, so that's plus 33/5. For B, you want this to be parallel, so you use a slope of -5 and a point of -8, 5, so it's y minus 5 equals -5 times x minus -8. This stays the same. This one is keep, change, and distribute. So -5x minus 40. We add 5 to each side, and so y equals -5. This video will be available on Haiku if you need to rewatch. You should now complete Module 23 practice problems in ALEKS by selecting Continue My Path. Don't forget there's an explanation for each problem, and I know this can be really complicated. It's easy to make a lot of positive and negative errors and silly math errors, so don't forget to go to your teacher's office hours if you need help with the practice as well. When you're done, you will need to do Quiz 23 after you complete your Module 23 practice problems.